The story begins with a team of explorers in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. On the ship was a weather officer named David, who gave the weather forecast. They were heading towards an island located in the middle of the ocean. The government had sent David there to observe the changing weather of the island. David was supposed to stay there for about a year to collect weather data, after which he was to return. David was provided with a year's worth of food and all necessary supplies. After many days of travel, they finally reached the island. They used a boat to land on the island. The island was completely deserted, not even a bird was in sight. On the island, there was a lighthouse and a small house where David was supposed to live. This was because a previous weather officer named Robert used to live there, but his duty was now over. He had collected weather data for a year alone on that island. Now, David would stay there for a whole year to collect data, and the old officer, Robert, would return with the ship. But when the whole team visited the house, they were shocked because there was no sign of a person. The old officer's belongings were scattered everywhere inside the room. After this, the captain and David thought that maybe someone might be in the lighthouse. The captain and David quickly headed towards the lighthouse and saw a strange sight there. They saw that the entire lighthouse was surrounded by sharp, pointed wooden stakes, as if someone had deliberately sealed it off so no one could enter. The captain and David knocked on the lighthouse door several times, but there was no response. Finally, they pushed the gate hard and entered. Inside the lighthouse, they found a man named Groner. When they asked Groner about the old weather officer, Robert, he replied that he was dead. He had gone towards the sea but never returned. Hearing Groner's words, both David and the captain were stunned. After hearing all this, the captain told David, "If you still want to, you can come back with us." But David refused to go back. David thought that if he could give the government an accurate weather report from that island, he could get a hefty sum of money. The captain then gave him a gun for his own protection and told David, "This place doesn't look safe to me. Take care." After that, they left him there and sailed away, to return again only after a year. After the captain left, David made the house a bit more livable. That night, he found a diary in a drawer, which belonged to the old weather officer, Robert. The diary contained a lot about the island. It mentioned a mysterious creature, but the details were not clear, some parts were incomplete. David read every line carefully. The diary also had sketches of strange animals. David didn't understand why he made such pictures. Maybe he was lonely and did it to pass the time. On one page of the diary, there was also a photo of the old officer's wife. David got tired of reading the diary and slowly drifted off to sleep. The next morning, David started collecting weather data. But as he reached the sea, his steps stopped. He saw that some stones were strangely arranged between the rocks, and shells were placed among them in a peculiar pattern. David thought maybe Groner had done all this. Thinking this, he got back to work. While working, when he looked towards the lighthouse through the binoculars, he saw another person with Groner. But in the blink of an eye, the person disappeared. David tried to look again but then felt it was just his imagination. At night, David was busy with his work when there was a knock on the door. He thought it might be Groner. David called his name but got no answer. Holding a lamp in his hand, as David approached the door, he heard some strange noises that were definitely not human. And then he saw an odd creature's hand trying to reach inside from under the gate. It was definitely not a human hand. Seeing this, David was terrified. He immediately ran towards the basement and hid there. Within moments, the mysterious creature had entered the house. It was stealthily looking for David, and David watched it through a small crack in the basement. The creature noticed David due to his movement. Following this, the creature quickly ran towards David to kill him and tried to grab him through the crack. To save himself, David instantly took out a knife and stabbed it in the eye. The creature shrieked and ran away, but it could come back at any time, and it was confirmed in David's mind that what was written about the creature in the diary was true. He couldn't sleep all night out of fear. The next morning, when David went outside, he saw some footprints on the sand that were absolutely not human. The marks led straight to the sea and disappeared. Now David understood everything, why Groner had put pointed wooden stakes around the lighthouse. David now knew that if he stayed in the house, those creatures could kill him at any moment. Fearing for his life, David ran towards the lighthouse and shouted at Groner, "Open the gate. I need to come in." But Groner wouldn't let him in and said, "You should have gone back with the ship." David returned disappointed because Groner didn't want him even near the lighthouse. He poured water on him and told him to go away. Now he had to do something himself. He boarded up every window of the house. He made a perimeter of pointed wooden stakes all around, and placed old papers and books outside the gate. Then he sprinkled oil on them so that if the creatures returned, he could scare them away with fire. But there was one thing David didn't know yet, and he was about to find out that night. Fortunately, he found an old box inside the house. In the box was a gun and a lot of bullets. Seeing this gave him a little hope of survival. As the sun began to set, the fear in David's heart grew. Soon, the darkness of the night enveloped everything. David sat quietly in a corner of the house with the gun in his hand. His heart was pounding. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard, and when David looked out the window towards the sea, he was again petrified. He saw not just one, but many of those strange creatures moving towards him from the water. In a short while, they all gathered and tried to break down the door of the room. David immediately started firing bullets, and some creatures fell dead. David thought that hearing the sound of the gun, they would be scared and run away. But seeing their companions die, they became even angrier. Then, David adopted Plan B and set fire to the papers and old books placed outside the gate. Seeing the fire, the creatures ran back into the sea in fear. But now, that same fire had reached David's house. The house door caught fire and slowly began to spread because the entire house was made of wood. David immediately wrapped himself in a blanket to save his life and got out, hiding behind a large stone near the lighthouse. David's hand was also badly injured while shooting the creatures. Suddenly, heavy rain started. The fire slowly began to extinguish. But even after the whole night of rain, David could not save his house by morning. The entire house was almost burned to ashes. Now, if David wanted to stay alive, he had to take shelter in the lighthouse. He picked up his rifle and hid among the stones near the lighthouse, waiting for Groner to come out to fetch water. When Groner came out of the lighthouse to fetch water, David followed him. But suddenly, a strange creature that was near Groner attacked David. But somehow, David managed to control it. The creature was Groner's protector. Just as David was about to shoot it, Groner immediately stopped David and said, "Stop, it's my pet." David didn't shoot and, taking advantage of the situation, he made a deal with Groner. "If you want to keep this creature alive, then I should be allowed to stay in the lighthouse. Otherwise, I will kill it." Following this, Groner agreed because David had a lot of food and gunpowder. Before evening, both of them took the remaining food and returned to the lighthouse, and they both slept peacefully. The next morning, the creature was quietly licking David's hand. When David woke up, he saw that his hand was completely healed due to the creature licking it. David was amazed to see all this. David now wanted to know more about this creature from Groner and then wanted to bring all this to the world because it was nothing short of magic. David thought that if they brought the secret of this creature to the world, both David and Groner would earn a lot of money and fame. But Groner didn't want any of this. He didn't want to leave this island. Groner had no one left in the world now. This island was perfect for him, where he considered himself a king and his own master. This is why he had written in several parts of the island, "Groner is the king here." But David couldn't understand how this strange creature became Groner's pet. So Groner explained that once, Groner saved its life. It had accidentally got caught in his fishing net. The creature was small then, and since that day, it stayed with Groner. It started obeying his every command. But Groner was a strict person. He treated the creature very badly. Groner had physical relations with the creature every day. Groner said that once this creature had also attacked him, and in return, Groner gave it such a punishment that after that, the creature considered itself Groner's slave. And you all must have understood why those creatures come out of the sea every night. They all come to rescue their companion from Groner and take her back. But Groner doesn't let that happen. The creatures cannot attack in daylight because the sunlight burns their skin. David didn't want to stay here anymore. He wanted to escape the island somehow. Well, evening began, and Groner told him, "Get ready with the gun because those creatures can attack at any time." They prepared to turn on the lighthouse light, and in a short while, a large number of creatures came out of the sea. They were moving towards the lighthouse. Groner kept firing at them, but David was completely scared. He began to move towards the inside of the lighthouse. Despite Groner's repeated insistence, he just sat quietly in a corner, and soon, David passed out. Groner fought these creatures alone all night. The next morning, Groner angrily splashed water on David's face to wake him and said, "If you want to live, you have to kill them. Otherwise, you'll be thrown out of the lighthouse, and you'll have to obey my every word. Bring water every day. Do the small and big chores of the lighthouse, and also do guard duty with me at night." Now David had no other option. Because of this, doing all this became his necessity. David now began to obey Groner's every word, but there was one thing he didn't like at all, which was physically torturing that female creature in different ways every day. Night falls. Both of them get ready for guard duty again, and once again, those creatures come out of the sea. But today, David was not afraid. He started firing at the creatures. But today, Groner was doing nothing. He closed the lighthouse gate, leaving David outside, and sat quietly inside so that David could learn how to fight these creatures himself. Fighting like this, David spent the night, and morning came. In the morning, Groner saw that David was sitting outside the lighthouse gate, covered in blood. Now he had learned how to fight these creatures. Time passed in this manner, fighting these creatures at night and managing Groner's lighthouse work all day. This island had become like a closed house for him. He constantly thought about when he would leave this place and breathe the air of freedom. Over time, David developed a strange friendship with that female creature. David started feeling sorry for her. Now he understood how difficult it is to live alone, away from your own people. Perhaps the creature felt the same way. David even gave the creature a name, Anarias. Days passed in this way, and then one day, they saw that the creature's attacks were slowly decreasing. David thought that maybe they went somewhere else in winter, or perhaps they understood that fighting these two would achieve nothing. But Groner told him, that's not the case at all. They will attack again. Now they are increasing their numbers. A few more days passed like this. One night after dinner, Groner and David started playing chess to pass the time. But this is where Groner made a big mistake. They both got so engrossed in the game that they forgot to turn on the lighthouse lights. Taking advantage of the darkness, the creatures attacked them. David saw that the creatures' numbers were so high that even two people could not fight for long, and this time, they had no plan. The gun bullets were also almost finished. Escaping somehow, they reached the top of the lighthouse. But in the meantime, Groner's leg was badly injured. The creatures had overpowered them today. Both thought that their death was certain today. But luckily, morning came. As the sun slowly rose, the creatures left the lighthouse and went back into the sea. After the bright sun came out, Anarias tried to heal Groner's wound. But by now, David had understood that they could not win this battle against these creatures. The bullets were also about to run out. They didn't have enough food to last long either. Luckily, the next day, when David was wandering outside the lighthouse, he saw a ship in the sea. He quickly brought a flare gun from inside and went to signal the ship. But Groner stopped him because he didn't want David to leave. At that moment, Anarias attacked Groner. She wanted to save David from Groner. Groner did not want anyone to leave this island. This island was his own world, where he lived like a king. He didn't want David to leave either. After being alone for so long, he now had someone he could talk to, and if David went back on that ship, he would go there and tell everyone about Anarias and them. That's why David couldn't leave now. Slowly, the ship disappeared into the sea before David's eyes. Now he had nothing left to do. A few more days passed like this. Groner was still treating both David and Anarias badly. But he especially beat Anarias, which David did not like at all. One day, David gifted Anarias a small toy boat that he had made from a fish bone. But when Anarias saw that boat, she took David to a corner of the island where a real boat was actually kept. When David asked Groner about this boat, he said, yes, he already knew that there was a boat in this part of the island. Groner said that some people had come to this island to save their lives by boat. But none of them survived before morning. The creatures had killed everyone. They were carrying ammunition on the ship, but due to a storm in the sea, their ship sank near this island. Hearing all this, an idea came to David's mind. They had something like a diving suit. David said, if one of us wears that suit and goes to the part of the sea where the ship sank, we might find some bullets or dynamite, which would make it easier to fight these creatures. But Groner refused to agree to this. However, David was ready to risk his life to do this. A few more days passed like this. A deep connection developed between David and Anarias. David started liking her. Groner secretly saw these two romancing. Groner felt that Anarias would be taken away from him. That's why David had to be removed from the path. The next day, Groner himself agreed to David's suggestion. He told David, okay, you will wear the suit and go down into the water, and collect a lot of RDX there. Then I will pull you up with the boat. But Groner's real intention was something else. He wanted David to bring the boxes of dynamite kept underwater back to the surface with his help and then leave him alone in the sea so that the creatures would kill him. This way, the dynamite would also come to him, and Anarias would become his slave again. The two of them sat in the boat and reached the spot where the ship sank in the water. David put on the diving suit and went down into the sea. After going down, David saw that the ship was completely destroyed. But he was lucky that he found some boxes of dynamite. But suddenly, some creatures appeared in front of him. Seeing the creatures, David panicked and fell down. The diving suit was so heavy that he couldn't even move, and David couldn't send a signal to Groner above. Groner thought that perhaps the creatures had killed David, but actually, they were only two small children. David somehow left his diving suit there and reached the surface himself. They found some old boxes there that contained dynamite. After this, both of them got to work. They laid dynamite in 2 layers around the lighthouse so that when the next attack came, they could finish off the monsters in one go. A few months passed, and the snowfall season arrived. But once again, the creatures disappeared. The attacks had suddenly stopped. It was as if the creatures had received news that a trap had been laid for them. That's why they were not attacking now. Groner felt that perhaps Anarias had warned those creatures. Because of this, he started tormenting Anarias, but David stopped him. Finally, the two of them came up with a new plan, to leave the main gate of the lighthouse open so that as soon as the creatures came near, they could be blown up with dynamite. David cleverly asked Anarias to scream at the top of the lighthouse. Hearing Anarias's voice, all the creatures became furious. When the creatures saw that the main gate of the lighthouse was open, they thought it was a good opportunity to free Anarias. But actually, it was a trap for them. In a short while, the creatures started coming out of the sea. They headed straight for the main gate and attacked David as soon as they entered. David also showed courage and saved his life from the creature. As soon as all the creatures reached the lighthouse, Groner pressed the dynamite lever, but there was no blast. Actually, David had disconnected it, and Groner had forgotten to reconnect it. David immediately ran upstairs and started connecting the dynamite wire. By then, the creatures were trying to climb the lighthouse, which only Groner was stopping alone. As soon as the connection was complete, David blew up the first layer. This killed many creatures in the blast. But there were still many monsters ready to attack the lighthouse. Because of this, Groner also blasted the second layer. Both of them passed out in the loud explosion. The next morning, when both of them regained consciousness, they saw that Anarias was not there. Dead creatures were scattered all around in the blast. Groner was killing all those who were still alive in an injured condition. Suddenly, David's eyes fell on a necklace hanging around the neck of one of them. Seeing the creature struggling, David felt pity for it and realized his mistake. The creatures they had considered ferocious until now were also like humans, just unable to speak. But for Groner, all this was nonsense. After that day, the creatures could never attack again. But every day, cries were heard from the seashore. David still didn't know how much damage they had caused. How many families were broken? How many children lost their loved ones, all because of a misunderstanding? The next day, David saw some small children of those creatures in the sea. They were all those who had lost their families. David made a round circle of stones and placed that small toy boat in the middle so that Anarias would return after seeing it. David waited for many hours, but Anarias never returned. Waking up in the morning, David saw that Groner was sleeping. Some old things were kept near Groner. Among them was an old photograph, and as soon as David saw the picture, he was stunned. The girl whose photo he had seen in the old officer Robert's diary on the first day was none other than Groner's wife, and Groner was standing with her in the photo. Actually, the weather officer Robert who came a year ago had not died. He had changed his identity. That is, Groner is the weather officer Robert. He had just changed his name because now he never wanted to leave this island. Seeing all this, David also gave up hope of ever being able to leave this island. The next day in the evening, when David went to the seashore, he saw that the small boat kept in that circle was no longer there. But in the same spot, he saw a small child of a creature holding that boat in its hands. David threw a burning piece of wood into the middle of that circle to show that his intention was not to fight and that he did not feel any danger from anyone. He wanted to make peace with them. A little later, Anarias emerged from the sea waves, and the entire group of creatures also came out of the sea behind her. But this time, no one attacked David because they also wanted peace. Their intention was only to find a safe place for their children. But then Groner arrived there with a gun in his hand. Groner felt that if there was peace, how would he feel superior? David tried to explain to him that these creatures do not want to fight, they want peace. But Groner did not listen to anyone. He yelled at Anarias, "Go inside." But this was the first time Anarias did not obey him because now she was not his servant. Seeing this, Groner felt that his kingship was no longer on this island. Groner felt internally weak because no one was obeying his command now. Angrily, he headed towards the lighthouse. David thought that perhaps Groner had now understood that every animal wants freedom, no one wants to live as a slave. But the obsession with kingship was not going to leave Groner. As soon as he reached the lighthouse, he fired a flare from the signal gun, which hit a creature's child directly. The child died instantly. All the creatures ran away in fear, and Anarias also lost all faith in David. Furious, David immediately ran towards the lighthouse to teach Groner a lesson. David started fighting with him. "Why did you do all this? These people just wanted peace." But Groner had become so violent that he decided to kill David. As he was about to strike David with an iron rod, David called him by his real name and said, "Stop, Robert. You are not a murderer." Hearing this, Groner immediately stopped. Actually, Robert was never such a person. After coming to this island, his mental health had deteriorated due to loneliness. Loneliness, the death of his wife, and deep depression, all these had made him like this. He was not a killer in reality, he was a good person. Groner realized that these creatures never wanted to fight, they just wanted peace. Groner killed them only to show himself powerful, and now Groner had realized his mistake. That's why he surrendered himself to those creatures, and in a few moments, they killed him. David locks himself inside the lighthouse. Time passes like this, and after a year, a government official comes to the island. A new weather officer is also with him. Now the new government officer was supposed to monitor the weather on this island. When the captain asks David about the previous officer, David also says the same thing, that he went towards the water but never returned. And the weather officer also thinks that David is Groner. David did not correct their misunderstanding either. He quietly went to the balcony and stood there without saying anything because now he also did not want to leave this island, just like Groner. During this time, Anarias was also happy with her family. Now they were not afraid of a man like Groner. Now they could live freely on the island and in the sea. With this, the story ends.